All right, we're going to wait 1 more minute and see if anyone else comes, and then we'll start. All right. Let's get started. So this is part 21 of our series on the 8th chapter of Bava Kama. And we are going to be on pages 90b and 91a this evening. And we are continuing our discussion from before Pesach, in which we had raised the question of whether if the members of the court had seen the crime themselves, whether that disqualifies them as judges or not. Right? In other words, whether a witness can become a judge in the same case. And okay, so we're starting here from this Safar Rabbi Akiva De'ed Na'aseh Dayan. Does Rabbi Akiva really think that a witness can become a judge? Because the position that we had ascribed to Rabbi Akiva in that last class did involve Rabbi Akiva himself being the one who thought that the person who saw the crime can still judge as the judge. But we have the following braita: V'hatanya v'hika ish et re'ehu be'even u'be'egrof. So let's go to Shemot 21 and see the context here. So I'm in Shemot 21, 18 and 19, and says V'chi rivun anashim. If men are fighting, v'hika ish et re'ehu be'even u'be'egrof, and one man hits the other with a rock or with a fist, v'lo yamut v'nafal l'mishkav, but the victim does not die, and he falls into bed. If he gets up and he walks outside under his own power, then the assailant is cleansed of guilt, at least he's not a murderer anyway. Just he needs to pay the shevet, the payment for unemployment, and he needs to pay the doctor bills. And presumably, since we're in the chapter of Chovel, he has to pay the other 3 payments for assault as well. But he isn't a murderer, because once the victim is able to get up and walk around outside under his own power, that's considered enough of a recovery that whatever happens after that isn't going to be a direct result of the original assault. Okay, so now we're trying to interpret the word fist in that sentence. All right, so the Braita says that if a man hits his friend with a rock or with a fist, and Shimon HaTimni says, Ma egrov miuchad shemasur le'idav le'edim. What's special about a fist? What's special about a fist is that it is given over to the court and to the witnesses. In other words, the witnesses and the court can see the fist. They can examine the fist. Presumably, they can determine whether this person is actually strong enough that he, should have been careful not to be taking swings at people because he could kill them. Because if you kill somebody in a way that could not predictably have caused a human death, then you can't actually be convicted of murder for that. The result of the person dying has to have been predictable in order for you to be fully culpable for murder. So the witnesses and the court here can examine the fist and they can say, yeah, that looks like a big, strong fist. Or no, actually, if that were my fist, I would assume it wasn't possible to kill anybody with it, right? The fist is something which can be brought into court and can be examined.
Deborah?
Yes, ma'am.
But two things, even a very small, well, even a smaller fist can kill somebody if it's done in a certain place, but
we're going to get to that very soon.
But also a foot can also, just like a fist can, a foot can kill somebody. Also, if it's done.
There are many, many, many murder weapons that you could kill somebody with. I think what Shimon HaTimni is picking up on is that there was no particular reason for there to be a list of weapons here at all. It could have just said somebody hit his friend in a fight, and then the guy didn't quite die yet. Right? You don't actually have to list weapons. So he's trying to say, what is it about rocks and fists that's special so that you'd bother to name them?
But what he brings isn't special to them.
Well, it is true of them. So he's trying to say that everything else that's also in that category is also potentially a murder weapon.
So it's a case of klal and prat. So, well,
he's gonna say that things that don't fit this description don't count, are not gonna work. Or at least he has a particular case in mind that doesn't fit this description that he says you can't try the person for murder in that case.
Okay. So these are typical of things in their class. They're just examples given. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, so it's still Shimon HaTimni talking, and he says, Prat l'sheyatzta mitachat yad ha'idim. So this excludes a case in which the murder weapon got lost by the witnesses. Right? The witnesses saw the weapon, but now the witnesses can't show it to the court. So it does not fit Shimon HaTimni's standard, and therefore the case is not triable because the weapon is lost. Rabbi Akiva doesn't like that. Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, v'chi bifnei beit din hikahu. Rabbi Akiva says, wait a minute, are you also requiring that the assault itself take place in the courtroom, in front of the court? Sheyodim kama hikahu v'al ma hikahu. So that the court will know how hard he hit him and on what part of his body he hit him. Im al shoko or al tzipor nafsho, whether he hit him on his leg or he hit him on his tzipor hanefesh. Now, tzipor hanefesh is very, very hard term to translate. It seems to mean the bird of the soul or something of that sort. And nobody can quite agree what body part it is. Rashi says it's the lobe of the heart. The Aruch, I think I put some of the definitions in the footnote down here. Yeah, the Aruch says that it's somewhere under the neck and above the breast. Jastrow says it's the cartilage at the end of the sternum. It appears to be something in the middle of the body, but I think what we're trying to get at here is a place that you can hit somebody and they will die from a surprisingly small injury. This is the right, if you've heard of baseball players who die from being hit by a baseball that we wouldn't normally expect to be lethal because it happens to hit their heart just right and it stops the heart. I think that's the phenomenon we're talking about here, except that the Gemara seems to assume that there's actually it's not that you have to time it exactly right with the heartbeat and whatever, but that there's actually a body part, which if you can just hit it just right, it just kills people. Which, since we don't have a great explanation of the phenomenon either, it's not that much sillier sounding than the way we try to explain the phenomenon now. But in any case, Rabbi Akiva's point is that if you are really going to require the judges to have personal knowledge of the details of the case that they would get from the murder weapon, why would you draw the line there? Why not insist that the judges can't judge the case unless they actually watched the crime? And then furthermore, he says, suppose that somebody pushes somebody else off of a roof or off of a fort wall, and that person dies, Beit Din holchim etzel bira o bira holechet etzel Beit Din. Does the court have to go to the fort, or for that matter, does the fort have to be brought to the court? And I can hear here in the back of my mind Perry Mason jumping up and down, yelling, "Yes, yes, the court needs to go see them." But I think here it is intended as a reductio ad absurdum argument, that it's obvious to everybody that of course you're not going to make the court go look at the walls that the person was pushed off of. And furthermore, if the wall has collapsed since the person was pushed off of it, are we going to rebuild the wall so that the court can examine it? Right. In general, Rabbi Akiva is saying, look, there's no end of details that you could. Thank you, Jerry. There's no end to the number of details that you could insist that the court be able to personally examine. And we apparently are not prepared to insist that the court examine all of them. So therefore, you're wrong, and the court doesn't actually have to see or touch or examine any physical artifacts. They're just allowed to trust the witnesses and the witness's description. Yes, John.
I'm imagining that the wall was all of 4 inches high. Would it not be worth? I would imagine that the fence. Somebody would want to say, "Hey, you got to see what this wall was." That it wasn't really a wall.
So, to the extent that we're, I think the answer to that is that yes, we're very interested in whether the wall is high enough, but we're willing to trust the witnesses as to, say, the identity of the murderer, and all of the other things that happen. We'll trust the witnesses about how high the wall was too. And if you want to challenge that, you can bring different witnesses that say the wall was a different height, but we don't actually have to bring the wall for the judges to look at. They can trust testimony. Although in the system we're imagining here, there aren't actually defense attorneys. There are judges on the court who are appointed to try to think of the best arguments they can think of to defend the defendant. So presumably this would be up to those people or up to the defendant himself. But either way, I think if we're going to accept witnesses saying the wall is 100 feet high, we would also have to be willing to accept witnesses who would say that's ridiculous, that wall is 4 inches high. And then the court will do its best to figure out what the reality is. But one way or the other, Rabbi Akiva thinks this is a good reason to say that Shimon HaTimni's interpretation of the word fist does not work. That can't be what the word fist means. So he goes on to tell us what he thinks it means instead. Ella, so instead, what is it that the word fist is meant to teach us? Miyuchad hu masur le'idim. So Rabbi Akiva's actually, his interpretation is very similar to Shimon HaTimni's. It just moved over one step in the process. So he says what's special about, or what's particular about a fist is that it can be examined by the witnesses, right? All he does is he basically buys Shimon HaTimni's interpretation. He just leaves the court out of it. The witnesses have to be able to see the murder weapon. So af kol shehu masur le'edim. So likewise, anything that the witnesses can have given to them to examine is a legitimate murder weapon. This is to exclude a case in which the assailant manages to lose the rock before the witnesses have a chance to see it, in which case he can't be tried for murder because even the witnesses didn't see the murder weapon. So even the witnesses have no way of knowing whether the rock was actually big enough to kill a person with, and so there's no case. Okay, all of that was just to get us to the point where we would notice that Rabbi Akiva said as a part of a reductio ad absurdum argument, but he said it, that do you really think that it's necessary for the court to see the crime committed? Right? Ktani mihat, but it teaches Amar lo Rabbi Akiva v'chi bifnei beit din hikahu sheyodin kama hikahu. That Rabbi Akiva said to Shimon HaTimni, did he hit him in front of the court so that they can know how hard he hit him? Hahikahu bifneihem eid nasa dayan. But if the case were to happen that way, that the murder happened in front of the court, then the witnesses, the judges would all be witnesses. And we thought we established at the beginning of our evening that Rabbi Akiva thinks that the witnesses can't become judges. Meaning, if you happen to have been witness to a crime, even if you were otherwise qualified to sit on the court to judge the case, you now can't sit on the court to judge the case because you saw the crime. We thought that was Rabbi Akiva's position. And now we are saying, but in that case, why is Rabbi Akiva even suggesting that, even as a reductio ad absurdum, why is he suggesting that the court should have to be watching the crime? The court watching the crime ought to totally invalidate them from judging the case at all. Like, so that shouldn't enter into the situation. So the Gemara says, "Lidvarav de Rabbi Shimon HaTimni kamar." He was speaking according to the position of Rabbi Shimon HaTimni, v'leilo svirle, but he doesn't actually think that. Meaning, what he's saying is, according to you, Shimon HaTimni, you think that if the court were to watch the crime, they could then judge the case. But are you really requiring them to watch the crime? Seriously, you think the only time you can ever try a murderer is if there happens to have been a court of 23 qualified judges sitting there watching him commit the murder? Because that's going to really limit the number of murder prosecutions, right? That's the question he's asking is, do you really think this? Not, is that really true? Because he definitely doesn't think it. He doesn't think that the court even could try the case in that case. But he doesn't need to argue it in his own voice because he already knows he disagrees with Shimon HaTimni. He's just trying to convince Shimon HaTimni. Okay, we are going on to another related situation. And we are now moving to a universe of assailants and convicts, all of whom are animals, but we're going to treat them like humans because we have a principle. We have a principle when animals kill people that we try the animal for murder in exactly the same way we would have tried the animal's owner for murder had the animal's owner committed the murder. And that has some strange results, but we'll get to that in a second. First, we need to define some terms. So in the world of assault by animals on people, or for that matter, assault by animals on property, and I think we've touched on this once or twice before, there are two different categories of animals, and it's always put in terms of an ox, but most domesticated animals fit into the same categories. We just always describe them as oxen because that seems to be the most destructive domesticated animal people were allowing to walk around. Any ox starts out as a short tam, an innocent ox. And an innocent ox, which is an ox that hasn't been repeatedly convicted of damaging stuff and whose owner has not been repeatedly warned to control it or lock it up, or better yet, eat it for dinner so that it will stop destroying things. An innocent ox, the owner only pays for half of the damages that it does. Whatever the damage is that it does, you just divide the number in half. That's how much the owner owes, capped at the value of the animal itself. Because hypothetically, you shouldn't have to do more than just give the animal to the other person. You don't actually have to give them the animal. You can give them money instead. But you shouldn't ever have to pay more than it would cost to just hand over the animal to the victim. Okay, that's a shor tam. But once the animal has broken or destroyed property twice or three times, depending on who you rule like, then the owner gets formally warned that this is a destructive animal. And at that point, as I said, they're supposed to either lock it up or kill it and eat it. At that point, the animal becomes a shor mu'ad. Mu'ad means warned, is a warned ox. And a shor mu'ad, if it does further damage, the owner has to pay full damages, no cap. And they have to pay it out of their own property. They can't just hand over the animal instead. Okay. Now, let's see this Breita here. Tana Rabbanan. Shor tam shehi mit v'hizik. If we have a shor tam that both killed a person and damaged property, danino to dine nefashot ve'ein danino to dine mamonot. We judge the capital case, but we don't judge the financial case. And the reason for this seems to be that there's no point in judging the financial case, since the damages are going to be capped at the value of the animal, and the animal has no value because it's about to be put to death. So there's not much point in having a trial whose conclusion will be, well, you should owe money, but you don't. That's just a waste of everybody's time. Okay. But on the other hand, we do have a capital case. We put the animal on trial for its life and we kill it because it killed a person. Muad shehimit v'hizik. On the other hand, if you have a shor muad that both killed a person and damaged property, danino to dine mamonot v'chuzrin v'danino to dine nefashot. Then we judge the financial case first, and then we go back and we judge the capital case. Yeah, I'll hold what I was going to say. Kadmu v'dinuhu dine nefashot. If they judged the capital case first, presumably by mistake or because they didn't know about the damages yet at that point or whatever, but they did it. They judged the capital case first. Then in chozrin v'danino to dine mamono, you can't go back and have a financial case once the capital case has been judged. So the Gemara asks, what difference does it make? If we did judge the capital case first, who cares? Let's go back and judge the financial case also anyway. Amar Rava, ashkachtinu l'Rabbanan debei Rav. So Rava says, I once found the rabbis of the school of Rav, deyatvi v'ka'amri. They were sitting around and they were saying the following. Hamani Rabbi Shimon hatimnihi. So who is it that says that if you have already judged the capital case against this shor muad, then you can't judge the financial case? That must be Rabbi Shimon hatimni who's talking there. De Amar ma egrov miuchad shemasur le'edav le'edim, because Shimon hatimni said that the fist is special, or it's particular, in that it can be shown to the court and to the judges, to the witnesses. Alma ba'inan umdina de beidina. So it must be that Shimon hatimni thinks that things need to be officially appraised in the court. In particular, it seems like Shimon hatimni there was talking about a murder weapon being assessed for its deadliness. In this case, it would be an assessment of presumably the ox's ability to damage whatever it is that it damaged, or possibly of the value of the stuff that it damaged. But whatever it is, it would require sounds like a formal appraisal. Just witnesses saying this is what I know to be true is not good enough. You need to bring in experts. They need to examine stuff. That takes time. So, V'ha kevan de gamar dina lekatala. And in this case, for this shor muad, since we've already announced a verdict of death for this ox, lo mashinanle, we don't delay it for a court appraisal, and we don't oppress the judgment or make justice oppressive. Now, that's a phrase that makes a certain amount of sense if you're talking about a human convict and you've just pronounced the verdict that you're going to kill the guy, and then you decide, well, I'll kill him later. And you just sort of leave him tied up there while you go and have lunch, right? That's an insensitive, noxious thing to do. Notwithstanding that the American system seems to think it's totally appropriate to wait 25, 30 years before you put somebody to death. But that there are costs and benefits in both directions, and I want to acknowledge that. But one of the costs of waiting a long time is that it's not pleasant to sit around thinking you're about to die for a long period of time, or even for a short period of time. This idea makes zero sense when you're talking about a cow, both because the cow has no idea what the people are talking about because it doesn't speak Hebrew or Aramaic or English or whatever language the court is speaking, and because we routinely plan to kill cows and then, go about our business before we don't decide, we're going to kill this cow and take it to market. Oops, now that we decided that, we better kill it right away. We can't break for lunch first. Right? We don't normally feel that way about cows. The only reason we're applying this principle here is because we have a principle that we always treat an animal that killed a person. We procedurally in court, we always treat them as if they were a human assailant. So here also we're doing the same thing, not because it actually makes any sense, which it doesn't. There's no inui hadin. There's no oppressiveness of having to wait for the verdict to be carried out for a cow. That's not a real thing. Okay, but in any case, because we are going to use the court procedures for humans, we're using the vocabulary about the court procedures for humans also. And we're saying, look, if this were a human assailant who had killed a person and we just convicted them of murder and now we're going to put them to death, we would not say, oh, wait, you also owe somebody money. Let's have a different court case first. That would be a totally inappropriate perversion of justice. And we would tell the person he owes money to, I'm sorry, it's too bad. That's not a good enough reason to delay this person's execution. Okay, so that must be, according to these rabbis from the school of Rav, that must be why we don't do the financial case once we have already done the capital case. And it must be that it's according to Shimon HaTimni, because he has this idea of courts examining artifacts. And Rava says, he said, but I told them, right? I ran into them. I heard them having this conversation and I interrupted them and I told them they're wrong. I told them, Afilu Tema Rabbi Akiva. I said, you can even say that this is Rabbi Akiva. It doesn't have to be Shimon HaTimni. And in which case, Rabbi Akiva is only going to work if it's a particular case. But in which case would it work to say that this is Rabbi Akiva? It would work if the owner has disappeared. Then now we interrupt ourselves briefly and we say, I barach, kilo danuhu dine nefashot, hechi dainina dine mamonot below bailing. If the owner has disappeared, then even if we hadn't judged the capital case yet, which is what this should say in the English, I'm sorry, but even if we hadn't judged the capital case yet, How could we possibly judge a financial case? We don't judge people in absentia as owing money. They have to be present so that they can, disagree with the witnesses if necessary. So if the owner of the ox has disappeared, has run away, then we couldn't judge the financial case, even if we were doing it in the right order. So how does that help? So it must be dekabil sahade uvarach. It must be that this is a case where if we're going to read this bright as being according to Rabbi Akiva, then it must be that what we have is a case where we judged the capital case, we found the shore guilty, we're now planning to execute it, then we say, oh no, wait, we have a financial case against the same ox for damaging property, and we convene the court, we accept the witnesses, and then after the witnesses have already been accepted by the court, then the owner disappears. Okay, but in that case, what's the point in judging a financial case against someone who's not there? He's not going to pay anyway. So mehecha mishtalem. So if the owner has vanished, then why would you bother judging a financial case against somebody who's not around to pay anyway? So how would you pay it? You would pay it mi ridia. You'd pay it from plowing. Now, what that means is you rent out the ox plows people's fields, and eventually the ox will earn enough money to pay for the damage that he did. The court turns over that money to the person whose stuff was damaged. And then now that the ox has paid off its debts, you say, okay, we're done. You're done. Now we can put you to death for your other crime that we had already convicted you for. And that is why that's the moment at which Rabbi Akiva is going to pop up, and he's going to say, wait a minute, if this ox has already been convicted in a capital case, then you have to, with proper speed and procedure, you have to put it to death. You can't say, well, it's going to take it X number of days, or worse, X number of years worth of farm labor to earn enough money to pay off its debts, so we're going to keep it alive while it does that. That you'd never do that with a human convict. That would be inui hadin. That would be the oppression of justice. So that would be the case in which Rabbi Akiva is not going to allow us to deal with the financial case, because there's already been a verdict of death, is in a case in which the only way to pay the debt would be to keep the ox alive to work, so that the ox itself can earn the money to pay the debt. In that case, even Rabbi Akiva is going to say that judging the financial case is going to cause an undue delay in the execution. Jerry points out that it's also not a great idea to keep this animal alive because it seems inclined to kill people. That is also a good point, although it does not seem to be at the top of anyone's mind in this Gemara, and one kind of wonders why not. But thank you. Yes, that is a good point. Okay, but the Gemara wants to be distracted by something else. It says, Ihachi, if it's possible for an animal to earn the money with which it's going to pay its damages, then tam nidaine dine mamana beresha, then why are we not judging a financial case for the short tam? Remember, the reason we didn't judge the financial case for the short tam was because the short tam's damages are capped at the value of the animal, and this animal, since we're going to put it to death, is considered valueless. But if it's a possibility, if you do it in the right order, to if it hasn't yet been convicted of the capital crime, if it were a possibility for the animal to earn its own damages, then why don't we just do that with the short tam? We'll try the financial case first. It'll turn out that it owes, I don't know, $500. So we'll rent it out for a few days of plowing. It'll earn its $500. We'll hand that to the person who was damaged. Then we'll judge the capital case and we'll put it to death. And so shouldn't the earnings of the ox be considered to be part of the ox, so that this the idea of capping at the value of the ox could be, we could consider letting the ox earn the money as being inside that cap. The Gemara says, no. Amar of Mari Brader of Kahana, Zot Omeret Ridia Aliyah Demarahu. So it must be, the only way we can make sense out of this is that the work that the animal does is not actually considered part of the animal's value, so that it's, as I said, inside the cap of the animal's value. It's actually considered the owner's aliyah. Aliyah is the well, there are three gradations of values of farmland. Aliyah is the middle or the top. I don't remember which level, but it's the level that a shor muad's owner is supposed to have to pay from. Now, you may ask, what difference does it make which piece of land you pay as long as the piece of land is worth the right amount of money? Lots of people have asked that lots of times, and I don't have a very good answer to it. But in any case, when we say that the work that the ox does and the money the ox earns by doing this work counts as the aliyah of the owner, that means it counts as if it were the land belonging to the owner. It's the owner's property. It's not part of the ox itself, right? So apparently, when we said capped at the value of the ox, we literally meant like what you could sell the ox for. You can't sell this ox for anything because this ox is about to be killed. Therefore, it has zero value. Even if it could earn money, it still has zero value. Because it can't be sold for money. And whatever value it could generate by working in the meantime, that would just be the owner's income. And it's not considered to be directly connected to the ox at all. So there's no point in switching the order of the trials for the shor tam, because it's not going to be able to pay no matter what order you put it in. So the shor tam is still just going to have a capital trial and be put to death. The shor muad is not going to get a trial for a financial issue after it has been convicted of a capital crime, if that would cause a substantial delay. So if either you're Shimon Hatimni and you require official appraisals of objects in court, or if you're Rabbi Akiva, then you wouldn't have a financial case if the owner isn't available to pay out of pocket, and the ox would have to be kept alive to earn the money. And going back to our original question at the beginning, Rabbi Akiva, in fact, does not think that a witness can become a judge, but apparently Shimon Hatimni does think that a witness can become a judge. In fact, it sounds like Shimon Hatimni thinks that the best kind of judge is the judge who has as much information as possible about the crime, and the judge who has the most information about the crime would be the judge who actually witnessed the crime. All right, so you end up with this situation in which Rabbi Akiva thinks that witnessing the crime would disqualify you, and Shimon Hatimni is standing there saying, no, actually, I think that makes you the best possible judge for the situation. I believe Rabbi Akiva wins, but I believe most of the other rabbis agree with Rabbi Akiva, but we were mostly interested in Rabbi Akiva's personal opinion here because we quoted him by name in the last page, and we wanted to make sure that we had his position straight. Okay, that is what I have for you tonight. Are there questions? Okay. In that case, I guess I'll see you guys next Monday.
See you next Monday.
Have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you.
Good night.